All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Kislev, Haba Alinu Latova, Josh Becca Friedman, for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drashos this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Josh's father, Yisroel Yehuda ben HaRav Chaim Rephael, as well as for an aliyah for the Neshamas of all of those murdered in the October 7th and Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah terror attack in Eretz Yisrael, for a safe return for all of our chayalim and hostages in Gaza, and for a complete refuah, sheleima for all those injured in all of the attacks. Semi and Malka Esterson in memory of our parents, Hinda Esterson, Hinda bas Henoch Ephraim, Ludwig Stiefel, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Stiefel, Sarah Rachel bas Baruch Avram Zichronim Livracha. The Pepper family in memory of our brother and uncle Yosef Pepper, Yosef David ben Yaakov Zichronim Livracha. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Alan and Andy Stowis, in memory of Alan's mothers, Yichaya Bracha Bas Binyamin, and in honor of the courageous IDF soldiers who are fighting on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael, and Bernard and Varda Birnbaum, in commemoration of Dr. Birnbaum, Avram Ben HaChaver, Yisachar Dov Halevi Zichronim Bracha. We hope, and of course, again, we are dedicating all of Maseches Daf Yomi, Le'ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michal Harush, Hashem Yikom Damo, who was killed in the firefight by the police station in Sderot. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the Neshamas will have an aliyah, all of the families a Neshama, and all of those who require a refuah, sheleima, should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Let's say with that, let us begin. Okay, a little bit different than yesterday's daf, but Baruch Hashem, let us begin. So today's daf is Yud Gimel 13. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem at the. What I did realize yesterday is it is amazing to see how quickly you could do a lot of Gemara when it's 40 degrees outside. So that we're able to. We covered a lot of good ground yesterday. Baruch Hashem, it was impressive in a much shorter amount of time. Okay, in any event, so says the Gemara today's daf Yud Gimel 13a. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem 4 lines down from the bottom. 4 lines down from the top. Gufa. So let's just remember again, actually the Gemara is picking up on commenting on a brisa that we began to discuss yesterday. So Gufa, Umala Mal Bashem. So I will say, so remember again, the Torah is talking about over here, that halacha l'maisa, if somebody is going ahead, and let's say he's in possession of an item, and then, a pikadon, let's say, a person is a shomer, person is a guardian of a particular item, and then they go ahead and they deny having the item, or they deny having responsibility of the item, and then it is discovered that indeed they do have the item. So the halach is there's liability, there's financial liability, there's shavuah liability. So this discussion was trying to remember getting yesterday's daf. Let me take one more step back. In yesterday's daf, what we were focusing on was the concept of mamon bailin, that you could have something that is consecrated, but yet ultimately, again, it is still considered to be the possession of the owner, or the money of the owner, the money of the individual. In other words, up until yesterday's daf, the way we've often been conditioned to think is that if something is kodesh, if something is consecrated or hektish, so l'maisa, again, therefore by definition, it is not private property. What we saw in yesterday's daf is there is the possibility, there is the concept that something on one hand could have consecrated status, but yet still be considered the financial property of the owner. That's the concept. We saw Yosef Lili, Bechar, Kachim Kalim. So now, the Gemara is picking up on that a little bit more as well. So Gufa, Uma'ala Ma'al Ba'ashem, L'rabos Kachim Kalim, Shehem Mamono, Divrei Rabbi Yosef Lili. So I'll say, so the pasuk Uma'ala Ma'al Ba'ashem, when it's talking about the concept, ultimately again, that the lashon of Ma'ala Ma'al Ba'ashem means a person has committed an act of me'ilah against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet the context of the pasuk over here is that ultimately, again, I'm dealing with something that is quote unquote normal or unconsecrated, yet it's still an act ultimately again of me'ilah against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's that case? Rabbi Yosef says it's kachim kalim, lower sanctity karbanos, as we discussed in yesterday's daf. On one hand, they have consecrated status, but on the other hand, Rabbi Yosef says they are the property of the owner. So in other words, also what that means is I have a shlamim animal. I consecrated it as a shlamim. But nevertheless, even though that animal has a consecrated status, halacha l'maisa, that is still my mammon. it's still my animal. So, for example, if that animal were to go out and be mazik, right? If my shar, my consecrated shlomim, were to go ahead and damage your animal, I would be liable for that, even though this has a sacrificial designation. Ben Azai says, Rabbi says shlomim. It comes to include shlomim. That shlomim, once again, as much as it's consecrated, halach l'maaseh is still considered to be the private property of the owner. Abi Yossi ben Dostai Omer, lo Omer ben Azai, ella bebechar bilvad. That was interesting. So Abi Yossi ben Dostai is coming to qualify Ben Azai. So Ben Azai says it refers to shlomim. Abi Yossi says even when Ben Azai says shlomim, he doesn't mean all shlomim. Rather, what does he mean? Bechar animal. So let's analyze this a little bit. Amar Mar, Ben Azai Omer l'Rabbo says shlomim l'mi'utei mais. Well, so let's analyze this. So here's what we have. Everyone, these opinions mentioned are agreeing to this concept that halacha l'maisa, you could have something that has consecrated status, yet still be considered the mammon, the property of the owner. So the shaila just is, what are we referring to? So again, we have Rabbi Yossi Lili who says that it's all kachim kalim. Ben Azai who says it's shlamim, and then Abi Yossi ben Dostoi who wants to qualify Ben Azai and says, no, it doesn't apply to all shlamim, rather what does it refer to? Bechar. Okay, so now let's take each of these positions independently. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Amar, Ben Azai with the Maru Abu Shlamim Utimain. I remember again, we've seen this through Gemara. Whenever the Gemara comes to include something, by definition, what else does that do? It excludes something. So therefore, again, when Ben Azai says, Ben Azai's position himself, the way he espouses it, when Ben Azai says that it comes to include shlamim, what is it coming to exclude? So the Gemara says, maybe he's coming to exclude Bechar, or maybe Ben Azai holds that Bechar doesn't have the status of Mamon Bailim. So that would be hard to believe. Why? Hashta umashlamim shetu'unim smicha unisachim utinufas chazei v'shok. They're both saying shlamim themselves, shlamim requires like a lot of sacrificial processes, right? It requires smicha, which is the act of leaning on the animal. It requires nisachim, which are libations. Tinufas chazei v'shok, the waving of the chest and the foreleg. And yet, Rabbi says, in other words, you have something that is subject to many sacrificial rites, and yet, Amrit Mamon Bailahu. And yet, we're still saying that what? That Allah L'maisa, that is the property of the owner. So the Gemara says, Bechar mibai. So of course, Bechar should be Mamon Bailahu. But remember again, Bechar is not subject to all of these sacrificial rites. So if Shlamim, which is subject to all the sacrificial rites, is still considered to be the property of the owner, Mamon Bailim, so therefore again, Bechar, which is not subject to these sacrificial rites, should certainly be considered to be Mamon Bailim. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi's right across. Bechar mibai, ube Bechar bechutz la'aretz kamar, dechevan de lavlak ravakai, lo zachu le mishulchan gavah, de lo chazil gavah. So okay, Rashi throws in over here, interesting, not throw in, Rashi comments over here, something interesting. Rashi says that this is kind of like piggybacking on yesterday's conversation, that the Bechar animal that we're referring to over here is Bechar of Chutz La'aretz, where someone consecrated the firstborn animal from Chutz La'aretz, which Rabbi say, remember again, the Gemara said this was the end of yesterday's daf, where the Gemara said it's the kind of thing of that we don't want you to do it, but if you did it, it's consecrated, but Lamaisa, we still don't offer it up. Okay, the point over here is if shlamim is going to be considered to be mamon bailim, property of the owner, even though it is subject to all these sacrificial rites, so then Bechar, which is not subject to all these sacrificial rites, should certainly be considered mamon bailim. To which the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan, l'mi'utei meiser. Rather, Rabbi Yochanan says it's coming to exclude meiser behema. That according to Ben Azai, meiser behema is not mamon bailim. Now, remember again, what's meiser behema? You have a flock of sheep, right? You put them in the corral, small opening, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, comes out, a little red paint, right? A little red dye, and that is meiser behema. So maybe Ben Azai is coming to say that meiser behema is not mamon bailim. I say it's not mamon bailim. To which the Gemara says, it says by Bechar you cannot redeem. Right? It says by Bechar you can't redeem. Yet v'nimkar tam chai uba'al mum. Ubamum chai v'shachot. Right, so the Gemara says, I'm sorry, v'nimkar tam chai, ubamum chai v'shachot. You have to both say, by bechar, if ultimately, again, you are allowed to sell a bechar animal that is unblemished. Now the difference was in yesterday's daf. What's the halacha if you sell to someone an unblemished bechar? They can't really do anything with it until it becomes blemished. I said they'd have to wait around with it. But if it's a balmum, in other words, if it's a blemished bechar, then you could sell that whether it's alive or whether it's already been slaughtered. So by Meiser ne'emar lo yigael, the pasuk says by Meiser. So right, so the pasuk says by Meiser lo yigael, you cannot redeem it. Ve'ino nimkar lo chai v'lo shachot lo tam v'lo balmum. And let's remember again, Meiser behema cannot be sold at all. It's all right. It doesn't ultimately, again, you can't sell it if it's alive, you can't sell it if it's slaughtered, you can't sell it if it's blemished or unblemished. So therefore, again, I will say, can't be coming to exclude Meiser behema. So Ravina, mastila seifa. Ravina ultimately understands this on the seifa. Abu Yossi ben Dostai Omer. So let's listen to this. Abu Yossi ben Dostai said, La Omer ben Azai ella bibechar bilvad. So remember again, I will say, so Abu Yossi ben Dostai came to qualify Ben Azai. So Ben Azai said that ultimately, again, Pasuk is coming to teach me that shlamim are considered to be the property of the owner. Mamon Bailu. Abu Yossi came along and said, no. Ben Azai wasn't saying about all shlamim, rather he's talking about bechar. So again, according to Abu Yossi, so what is he coming ultimately again to? What is he coming ultimately again to exclude? If he's coming to exclude shlamim, hashta uma bechar shekadosh meirechem mamonohu. Now we'll say if bechar, now this is actually interesting, bechar is sanctified from the womb. Right? Remember again, bechar has already in utero sanctity. So if bechar animal which has in utero sanctity, ultimately again is still considered to be my property, mamon bailim, then shlamim mibai. We'll say shlamim is conferred sanctity. Remember again, bechar is inherent sanctity, shlamim conferred sanctity. So something which has inherent sanctity, which we assume is a stronger sanctity, ultimately again is mamon bailim, is ultimately the property of the owner, then all the more so something which has conferred sanctity is property of the owner. Rather, the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan lemi'utei meiser, is coming to exclude meiser behema. Meiser behema. So good. So I'll say, so again, so that seems to be the road that everybody's going towards over here. Lemi'utei meiser behema, d'chidesanya bebechor ne'amar lo sifta. By bechor it says you can't redeem it. Yet despite that, v'nimkar tam chai, ubamum chai v'shachot. Yet you could sell a bechor animal if it's unblemished, as long as it's alive, right? And if it's a balmum, you could go ahead and sell it, whether it's alive or whether it's slaughtered. The Gemara says, "But meiser ne'emar lo yigael, ve'eno nemchar lo chai v'lo shachot, lo tam v'lo balmum." You know, say by meiser behema, you can't sell it at all. Can't sell it at all. Now, the fact that you can't sell it at all would seem to indicate that what? That it's not mamon bailim. It doesn't really belong to the owner. Rather, again, it's really considered to be mamon gavoa. It really belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. So the Gemara says, but here's the problem. Ha bechar bilvad ka'amar. So the only issue is that halacha l'maisa Abi Yossi ben Dostai Stavka said only bechar. Only bechar. To which the Gemara says, you're right, kasha. That is going to be a question of this interpretation. Okay. So we'll say, so kind of like that marks the end. That marks the end of this discussion over here. So what we come out with is really something incredibly interesting, which is that halacha l'maisa, there is this concept which again seems to be I think conceptually we're introduced to it for the first time yesterday's daf, which is this concept that halacha l'maisa, you could have something that has a consecrated status, yet it's still considered to be the property of the owner. Up until Bava Kama, Daf Yud Beis and Mabeis, we're trained to think that if something is kodesh, by definition, it's not yours. It's not yours. You may be the custodian of it for the Beis HaMikdash, right? You're holding it, you're responsible for it, but it's not yours. So Rabbi Yossi really introduces us to this concept that halacha l'maisa, that there is a concept, ultimately again, of something being kodesh, having a consecrated status, yet still being mamon bailim, yet still being the property of the owner. Now what we see in today's daf is an interesting machlokes as to, even if you agree with that concept, what does it apply to? What does it apply to? So you have Rabbi Yossi saying it's all kachim kalim. That's already we saw yesterday's daf. Ben Azai saying it applies to shlamim, and Abi Yossi ben Dostoi narrowing the scope of Ben Azai, saying it only applies to Bechar. So everyone agreeing to the concept, but yet again disagreeing as to the what you apply the concept to. Okay, so I'll say, so now we're going back to the previous discussion. Rava Amar, my nechas shemila. So I'll say, remember again, how did we get into all of this? Because there was a statement in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that you're only chayev for damages if you damage property that is not subject to mi'ilah. Remember again, that was the statement of the Mishnah. Now we'll say, now we understood, what did that mean? So the way the Gemara understood it was actually interesting. The Gemara actually, it's fascinating to see how the Gemara jumped to a more complicated interpretation. Right? And the complicated interpretation was that you're not chayiv if you damage property that is subject to me'ilah, i.e., full Beis HaMikdash property. But you are chayiv if you damage consecrated property that is still owned by the owner. And that's how we got into this whole discussion over here of items that are consecrated yet still mamon bailin. Comes along Rava, and Rava says, I think you guys are making this too complicated. What does it mean when the Mishnah says that you're not chayiv if you damage property that is subject to me'ilah? Nechasim she'ein bahem din me'ilah umaynihu dehedyot. So we'll say, Rava says, you know what the Mishnah is saying? The Mishnah is saying is, you're only chayiv if you damage a regular guy's property. But if you damage Beis HaMikdash property, you're not chayiv. Rabbi say, by the way, we actually already saw that before, because if you remember again, the lashon of the pasuk of damages is you damage shor re'ehu, right? You damage the shor of your fellow, which always from the beginning seems to indicate to us that there's only liability when one damages personal property belonging to the other. But if one damages Beis HaMikdash property, sounds like there's not going to be liability. So comes along Rava, and Rava says, that's the meaning of the statement of the Mishnah. That what? That if you go ahead, that you're only chayiv if you damage nechasim she'ein bahen me'ilah. You know the definition of nechasim she'ein bahen me'ilah, nechasim not such to me'ilah, nechasim dehedyot. Right? Property that belongs to a regular person. That's it. To which the Gemara says, Velisni dehedyot. Such a good question. The Gemara says, so why don't you just say that? Just say that, right? In other words, why not just, I will say, this is a good din in interpersonal relationships as well. Right? Sometimes people say everything but what they mean. Right? In an effort, sometimes I'm nervous to go out, I'm nervous about someone's feelings, I'm nervous. Now, of course, one should always be mindful of someone else's feelings. But sometimes, again, it's not that I'm scared of someone else's feelings, I'm just scared to say what really needs to be said. So I talk around an issue. And if you've ever been on the other side of that conversation with someone who is talking around an issue, it is the most frustrating thing in the world. Sometimes in life it is just so much better to say whatever it is with the caveat of, I don't mean to be offensive, I don't mean to hurt, my words are not meant to deconstruct, but this is what's going on. So the Gemara says over here, why in a million years, if you're talking about nechasim of hedyot, why in a million years would you frame it as nechasim she'ein bahen me'ilah? That is such a strange and convoluted formulation. Just say, you're only chayiv if you damage property belonging to another individual. To which the Gemara says, kasha. You're right. It's a good question. Can't answer that one. Okay, next. I'm Rabbi Abba. Moses has some great cases over here. Shlamim shezigu, listen to this case. Shlamim shezigu, gova mibsaran ve'enu gova me'imurin. So we'll say, okay, a little bit of context over here. So watch this. I have a shlamim animal, right? I am the proud owner of a shlamim. Halavai in Yetz Hashem b'sha'a tova u'matzlachos. Right? So I am the proud owner of a shlamim. So now what happens? My shlamim animal, right, damages another animal. Right? My shlamim animal damages another animal. Right? So I'll say, so what happens? So now remember again, assuming that my shlamim animal is a first-time offender. So what's the halacha? The halacha is like this. Okay, we'll say, what is the halacha by first-time offender? Right? Chatzi nezek. Half damages. Now we'll say, now remember again, half damages are paid from what? Are paid from the value of the damaging animal. So we take half the value of the damaging animal, right? And ultimately, again, that's awarded right? Half damages, that's awarded ultimately, again, to the damaged party. Now, in a sheleima animal, we'll say, sheleima animal has two parts. Right? What are the two parts of the sheleima animal? Number one is the actual part of the animal that the owner is going to get to consume. That's the basar. Then there's emurin. Then the sheleima animal also has parts of it that are going to be offered up on the mizbeach. So we'll say, so this presents, so what the Gemara, so the statement of the Gemara is that when my sheleima animal damages someone else, the chatzi nezek, the half damages that are paid, are only paid from the parts of the animal that I could consume, but not from the parts of the animal ultimately that are offered up on top of the mizbeach. That I will say. Now understand where this comes up. Let's say the chatzi nezek, right? When we look at half damages from the meat that is going to be consumed, is not the equivalent of the damage inflicted. Right? I'll give you a simple example. Right? Let's say I go ahead and my animal damages Ruvain's animal. Let's say he kills Ruvain's animal. First time offender kills Ruvain's animal. Ruvain's animal was worth 300 zuz. 300 zuz. Okay. Now let's say it turns out I also have an animal that's worth 300 zuz. Right? But my animal, the meat is worth 100 zuz, and the emurim, the sacrificial parts, the meat is worth 200 zuz, and the sacrificial parts are worth 100 zuz. 100 zuz. So we'll say, so now I'm going to pay chatzi nezek from the value of the meat, of the consumable part of my animal, which is what? Not equivalent to damages done. Not equivalent damages done. So Rabbi Abba says, we're sorry, but that's the halacha. The damaged party, we'll say, interestingly, the damaged party will not be made whole. Will not be made whole, because again, my amount of damages are capped at the consumable part of my shlamim. An incredible halacha. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Abba shlamim sheziku gov mibsaran v'ene gov meimurehan. So the Gemara says, pshita. That's kind of obvious. Why is it obvious? The Gemara says, emurin legavoa salki. Now we'll say, so it's interesting. The Gemara says pshita because the Gemara seems to indicate that halacha l'maisa, the emurin don't belong to me. Right? It's almost as if they are removed from the animal already from the beginning. They don't belong to me. They're not mine. They belong to the Beis HaMikdash. They belong to the Mizbeach. So because they're not mine, they're not really part of the calculation. Lo tzricha legavoa mibsaran kineged imurin. So I'll say this is interesting. So no, you might have thought like this. Even though you can't go ahead and the imurin are for the Mizbeach, maybe we give a corresponding amount of the meat corresponding to the emurim. In other words, let's say there was enough meat to go ahead and, when I say meat, remember again, we'll say the animal's not slaughtered yet. I'm calling it meat because we're referencing the part of the animal that can be consumed ultimately by the owner. So I might have thought, in other words, give the damaged party the value of the corresponding parts of the meat corresponding to the emurim. So you can't give the value of the emurim, but give a corresponding part of the meat. So the Gemara says, aliba deman. So let's analyze this. So Gemara will say, this is absolutely fascinating. So listen to this. I aliba derabanan pshita. And I will say, here, this is so great. The Gemara is introducing a totally unrelated case. Look at Rashi. You see Rashi, I aliba derabanan. It's the last short line of the shortest line. Rashi says, I aliba derabanan. Listen to this. Great case. The pligale Rabbi Nasa meparak shorsha agachas apara gabi shorsha dachav eschaver lebar. We'll say, watch this. One shar, right? Shar A, ox A, pushes ox B into a pit, and ox B dies. Okay? Now watch this. So Rabbi says, listen to this. What's the halacha? V'aminon betam bala shar mishalim refuah ubalabar potter mipnei shezeh pilo. So we'll say, now listen to this. Now, if the first shar is a first time offender, so it's tam. What's the halacha by tam? Chatzi nezek, half damages. But I will say, now the truth is, the Rabbana will say in this case it's not even half damages. Really, what is it? Interesting, it's quarter damages. Why? Because the shar is not the only offender, right? The shar is part of the is one of the mazikim, one of the damagers. Who's the other damager? Bar. So therefore, again, according to the Rabbana, it's interesting. The owner of the shar will pay quarter damages, but the owner of the bar technically has to pay quarter damages. But at the end of the day, ultimately, again, he's not going to really be liable to pay, right? Why is he not liable to pay? Because Lamaisa, it was shar A that pushed shar B into the bar. So therefore, again, really according to the Rabbanon, all the owners of Shar B will get is quarter damages from the owner of Shar A. That's the position of the Rabbanon. So the Gemara says, again, we're going to see this case later on in Meretz Hashem. He says, "Umamuad bala shar mishalim chasi or bala bar pater." So I will say, so again, the whole chap of this idea over here is, and if it was a muad case, so the owner of the shar pay half damages, but nothing is really collectible from the owner of the bar, because the owner of the bar has a very solid claim. What's a solid claim? Right? Your animal, right? Shar A pushed Shar B into my bar. It wasn't my bar that's the mazik. It's Shar A that's the mazik. Now the truth is, it's a legitimate claim, but Lamaisa again, there is still mutual contribution to these damages. So the owner of Shar A is going to say, well, it was the bar that damaged. The owner of bar is going to say, it was the Shar that damaged. One thing is clear, which is obviously the owner of Shar A is going to have to pay something, right? Because Lamaisa, he did do an act of goring. So, according to the Rabbanon will say, Shar A, right, the owner of Shar A is going to be liable. A first-time offense for quarter damages, second-time offense for half damages, and the part of damage from the owner of the bar is not really collectible. The point over here is, you see from the Rabbanon, even when you are unable to collect from a secondary source of repayment, the first source of repayment is not chayiv to make up the difference. Not chayiv to make up the difference. Now, why is this important? Because again, this would come up in the case of a shlamim, right? My shlamim animal damaged someone else's animal. Let's say there's not enough, right? So we don't say, even though you can't go ahead and pay from the emurin, from the sacrificial parts, we don't say make up the difference from the meat. Right? You don't say, so this is the position of the Rabbanon, that when you cannot make up the difference from, right, when the secondary source of repayment is not available for repayment, you do not make up that repayment from the first primary source. Incredible. So I will say, on the other hand, take a look at the next Rashi. I'm just going to go ahead and Rashi for just a moment. Look at Rashi. Rashi says over here. Rashi says over here. Okay, Rashi says over here, it's the second to last of the intermediate lines. Rashi says, Rabbi Nassan, Hada Amar Nami Lakashlim, Mi Bala Shar Mishalim, Mi Bala Bar, Damar Bitam Bala Shar Mishalim Refuah, Bala Bar Mishalim Shlosha Chalakim, Ubemuad Bala Shar Mishalim Mechza, Bala Bar Mechza. I will say, Rabbi Nassan is of the opinion that Halacha Lamaisa, the owner of the bar in that previous case, right, where again, Shar A pushes Shar B into a pit and Shar B dies. So Rabbi Nassan is of the opinion that the Bala Bar is absolutely liable to make up the difference. In damages. So too again, Rabbi Nassan would be of the opinion that Allah Chalamais in a shlamim animal, you would be able to collect from the meat corresponding to the emurim. So now let's go back to the Gemara. Here we go. So we'll say, let's go back. Let's read it all again. Rabbi Abba, shlamim she'eziku. Right. So my shlamim animal damages another regular animal. So govim mibsarim v'en agov me'emurehen. So the halacha is you could collect chatzi nezek from the basar, from the meat, so to speak, from the value of the meat, from the value of my animal, of my shlamim animal, that is consumable by me. So the Gemara says, Pshita, emur legavo asalki. Of course, because the emur and the sacrificial parts are as if they're not there. They're for the Beis HaMikdash. L'tzricha legavo mibsaron keneged emurin. So I say, no. What we're talking about over here is the possibility that halacha l'maisa, maybe I should go ahead and collect from the meat corresponding to the sacrificial parts. We'll say, I'm sorry, just one more Rashi. Just indulge you with one more Rashi and out of order. I've never done this before. Out of order on Rashi, first time. Rashi, go back to Rashi, lo tzricha, only because the case here is good. Rashi says, hadik tani eina gov me'murain, hadik kana shalom, then gov me'misar, okay, again more. Keep going. Here it is. Shar shavem asayim. Here we go. You have a shar that is worth 200 zuz. Shenagach shar shavem asayim. That gored another shar that is worth 200 zuz. Eina gova ela chatzi demei bisaro. Remember again, you collect chatzi nezek, half damages, and that's half damages of the value of the damaging animal. Afagav delo havim manish shalim. Now we'll say, now remember again, here's the chap, right? So now, my shlamim shar, worth 200 zuz. Damage, my shlamim shar. Damages another animal that's worth 200 zuz. Okay, so what's the halacha for a first-time offender? Chatzi nezek. We'll say, you would think, what's the value? What's chatzi nezek? 100 zuz. What's the problem? That's not going to be the case by my animal. right? My animal, chatzi nezek, is not 100 zuz. What will chatzi zuz? Let's say, for example, it'll be 75 zuz. Why? Because remember, half the value of my animal includes imurin, right? Sacrificial pieces, and sacrificial pieces are not counted as part of damages. So therefore, it turns out that the damaged party is not going to receive half the value of my animal, 100 zuz. Rather, what is he going to receive? 75 zuz. 75 zuz. The value of half of my animal minus the imurin, the sacrificial parts. Incredible. So now I'll say back to the Gemara. Let's go. So the Gemara says, good. So aliba deman. So who's going to this reflect? Aliba derabana. So I'll say if it's derabana. Now remember again, that's the rabbanon we just quoted before about the case of where Shar A pushes Shar B into the pit, where ultimately, again, the damaged party only gets quarter damages from the owner of Shar A, and does not get, and the pit guy is not going to be obligated to pay. And even though the pit guy is not going to be obligated to pay, the owner of the shard does not have to make up the difference. So according to that logic, pshita, ha'amri ki leka l'shtalumi mehai lo mishkala mehai. Because Rabbanan say, just because you can't collect damages from the owner of the pit, doesn't give you the ability to collect more damages from the owner of Shar A. With Rabbi Nassan, it's Rabbi Nassan, ha'amar ki leka l'shtalumi mehai. Rabbi Nassan does hold that when you can't collect from one party, you can collect from another party. So therefore, again, I will say in that case, you should even be able to collect the meat from the meat corresponding to the imurin. Ibais ema Rabbi Nassan, ibais ema Rabbanan. The truth is, you could align this position with either of these two positions. How so? Ibais ema Rabbanan. If you want to say by the Rabbanan, halimili b'trei gufe. Perhaps the Rabbanan say that's only when you have two independent parties, like in this case where you have the owner of the shar and the owner of the bar. Aval b'chad gufa, when it comes to one damager, matzi amar le mikol heichad deba'inan mishtalamna. Listen, when it comes maybe to one damager, you can say, listen, I'm getting paid. I don't care how I'm getting paid, right? How you want to do the math, but lamaisa, I'm going to get paid. So if I can't get paid from a murin, which is fine, then I'm going to take in for a repayment corresponding amount of meat. So the Gemara says, fine, fine, that's Rabbanan. Ibai Seima Rabbi Nassan, sorry. Ibai Seima Rabbi Nassan. If you want to say Rabbi Nassan, Hasabu, the Amarle Balashar Balabar, Rabbi Nassan's, in Rabbi Nassan's case, you can say like this. In that case, the Balashar could say to the Balabar, Ana Torai Bibirach Ashkach say, my deles li lishtalumi mehech mushlominach. But in the case of the bar, the damaged party, i.e. the owner of Shar B, can say, listen, to the owner of the bar, listen, buddy, here's the deal. My dead ox is in your pit. So here's what's going to happen. Whatever I could collect from the owner of Shar A, I will collect. But anything else I can't collect from the owner of Shar A, ultimately, again, I'm going to collect from you. Aval, Amud Beis, Aval, Hacha mi matzi amar, Basar azik, imur lo azik. But I will say over here, can you say that it was the meat that damaged and the imurin didn't damage? So I will say, technically speaking, you could align it with both of them. But I will say, but interestingly enough, what I just want to point out is that halacha l'maisa, this is how we paskin, that if you go ahead, so essentially what comes out of here is as follows, that if you have a shlomim animal that damages regular, and I will say, now remember, this is actually quite beautiful because all of our sugyas are tying together. So now I will say, now that we've established that a shlomim is really mamon bailum. Right? Shlomim is mamon bailum. The shlomim is my property. Even though it's consecrated, it's my property. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, if my shlomim animal damages another animal, I am responsible for that. Now, what's the wrinkle? So again, the wrinkle is, let's say it's a first-time offender, it's chatzi nezek. The wrinkle is, Rabbi say, is chatzi nezek, half damages, okay, we haven't learned this yet, but half damages come from half the value of the damaging animal. The interesting part by shlomim is the value of the entire animal is not really on the table. Why? Because part of the value of that animal is a murin. And a murin don't belong to me. Right? A murin belong to the Beis HaMikdash. Apparently, again, they're even designated even in the living animal itself. So the machlokes now is, so do we say, take a corresponding part of the meat to make up for the quote-unquote lost value of the murin or not? So that's going to be the fundamental machlokes. Okay, so we'll say good. So we'll see the resolution of that in Yirtzeh Hashem. We'll see the resolution of that in Yirtzeh Hashem in a little bit. Good, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Rava says as follows. We'll say another case. We're going to see a few more cases like this. Toda shezika. Supposed to listen to this. If you have a toda, right? So another case. I have a carbon toda, right? I have a carbon toda. Now we'll say, now what's going to happen? My toda offering. Toda also falls like into the category of shlamim. Just the unique part of toda is it's accompanied by 40 loaves. 40 loaves, which is unique by toda. So listen to this. So my carbon toda went ahead and damaged. So what's the halacha? Gova mibsara ve'inakov milachma. Interesting. So let's say you pay for damages from the meat, from the value of the animal which I could consume, but you don't pay damages from the loaves. Interesting. So the Gemara says, Pshita, that's obvious. So seifa is shricha, so shricha is shichle. So I need the seifa. Why? Nizak ochel basar umiskaper mevi lechem. Now we'll say, so no, I'll tell you what's interesting about this. What's interesting about this is as follows. So let's play this out, right? The way this plays out is like this. So I'll say, so I have a carbon toda. My carbon toda damaged someone. So what's the halacha? I pay damages. Where do I pay damages from? From the value of the meat of the animal, but not from the loaves. So the Gemara says, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is like this. After I offer up that toda, what I could do is I could actually give the meat to the damaged party and say, here's the meat, you eat the meat. Obviously, it's sacrificial meat, so it does have to be consumed in a certain way. Here, you eat the meat, and we're even. So the Brisa says, the damaged party can eat the meat, but I, the owner of the toda, have to bring the loaves. Umiskaper mevi lechem. The one who's achieving atonement has to bring the loaves. So Gemara says, Hanami pshita, that's also obvious. Ma'odetema. So what would you have thought? Listen to this. Kevan the lechem hechshera de zevachu. I would have thought like this, I would say, since the offering of the loaves is a necessary component for the effectiveness of the carbon, leimale, I, the owner of the toda, could say to the damaged party, listen, at achlis basar, if you're getting to eat the meat, va'ana aisi lechem, and I should have to bring the bread. In other words, we'll say, maybe the trade-off over here is like this, that if the damaged party is indeed going to be paid through the toda, and he's going to be literally eating the meat of the toda, I, the owner of Toda, should be able to say, listen, you can have the meat, I'm happy to pay you back, but you know what? You have to bring the loaves. You have to bring the loaves. You're getting to eat the meat, you should have to bring the loaves. Kamashmala no kala, kamashmalan the lechem, chiyuva de bailamu. But we'll say kamashmalan that that's not the case. Kamashmalan that the lechem, the bread, ultimately again, is the obligation of the owner of the carbon. And therefore, even in a case where my toda damaged, and I'm literally paying back the damaged party with toda meat, he's going to be eating the meat of my carbon. So you might say, you're eating the meat of the carbon, you bring the loaves. No, the loaves are an obligation upon the owner of the carbon and no one else. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Nechasim shehein shel b'nei bris. So we'll say, so now remember again, the Mishnah said, you're only chayiv if you damage property belonging to people of b'nei bris. Who are b'nei bris? Lemi'utei mai. So what does that come to exclude? So if you're talking about, it's talking about that if a Jew damages the property of an akum, that there's no liability there. We already learned that later on. Shar shal Yisrael, shenagach shar shal oved kochavim, pater. And we'll say, we'll discuss this, but a shar Yisrael that gores the shar of an akum is pater. So why do I need this statement over here? Tana v'hadar mefarish. No, both say, what this Mishnah does is, our Mishnah lays out principles, and then what? Subsequent Mishnayos go ahead and spell them out. So therefore, again, the principle is espoused over here when it says Nechasim shehein shel b'nei bris, you're only chayiv if you damage property belonging to b'nei bris. What does that come to teach me? Only chayiv for damaging property of a fellow Jew, but ultimately, again, exempt for damaging property of an akum. Later on, again, the Mishnah will explain this concept. Obviously, we'll have to see how this concept works in the context of a greater society. Nechasim hamiyuchadin. I will say the next statement of the Mishnah was, you're only liable if you damage nechasim miyuchadin. Now, what does that mean? So, what does that come to exclude? Lemi'utei zesh. Am Rabbi Yehuda. Ze omer sharcha hizik. So we'll say, interesting enough, this comes to exclude the following case. I will say, imagine the following situation. Right? I know that my ox was damaged. Right? My ox was gored. right? And I know that Ruvain's ox is in the vicinity, Shimon's ox is in the vicinity. So it says, right, they're both by the scene of the crime. So what happens? Ruvain says, Shimon, it was your shar. Shimon says, Ruvain, it was your shar. So what's the halacha? Ultimately, again, there is no way. So let me ze omer sharcha hizik, v'ze omer sharcha hizik. Well, so take a look at Rashi just for a quick moment. Let me ze omer sharcha hizik. She'ini yodei shar shalmi yiziko, shehayu imo shvarim shal anashim harbe, umiyuchad demastis enachim asher shiyu kol nechasim sheziku. Supposed to say, therefore, again, what the Gemara is saying is like this. When the Mishnah says that you're only chayiv for nechasim miyuchad, means the only way to collect damages is how? Is if you have a defined damager. If you don't have a defined damager, then halacha l'maisa, there is no liability for damage. So in other words, I can't say, well, Reuven and Shimon, listen, here's what I know for sure. It was one of your two oxen. Right, so therefore, I don't know, split damages, pay something else. No concept like that exists. There's only liability for damages when it is nechasim miyuchadin, when you have a defined damager and a defined victim. Right? Without that, ultimately, again, there is no liability. To which the Gemara says, Hatan l'kaman, but we learned that beforehand. Hayushnayin rotvin, right? Achar echad. So we'll say, listen to this. If there are two oxen running after my ox, right? So Ruben's ox and Shimon's ox are running after my ox. Zeh omer, and now we'll say at the end of the day, my ox is gored. My ox is dead. So, but again, so what happens? Zeh omer sharcha hizik. V'zeh omer sharcha hizik. So we'll say, obviously, Ruben says, Shimon, it was your shar that did it. Shimon says, Ruvain, it was your shar that did it. What's the halacha? Shneihen peturin. Both of them are pater. So we'll say, so we'll learn this halacha later on. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Tani v'hadam afarish. So we'll say, we keep giving the same answer, which is, it seems to be that the role of our Mishnah is to kind of like lay out the concepts and principles. Right? So our Mishnah is where ultimately we outline the concepts, and then subsequent Mishnayos are where they are spelled out. So therefore, again, our Mishnah tells us it has to be nechasim yuchadin, a defined damager, a defined damagee. Damagee a word? Damagee is a word, right? Yeah, damagee, right? And therefore, Allah said, but if there's any ambiguity as to who committed the damage, ultimately, again, no liability. Incredible. Let's go weiter. B'masnisa tana, this is interesting. Elsewhere we learned, no, that when the Mishnah says that you're only chayiv for nechasim miyuchadin means, Tana, prat l'nichse hefker. Interesting. It comes to exclude ownerless property. Now, what's the case of ownerless property? Hechidami, what's the case of ownerless property? So if it's a case of where my ox gored an ownerless ox, and I say, of course there's no liability. Why not? Man tavale, who's claiming against me? I was about to say, if the damaged ox is ownerless, then there's no claimant. Right? Obviously, there's no liability. Ella, watch this. The nagach tur de hefker tur didan. Rather, it has to be a case of where an ownerless ox gored my ox. I will say, if that's the case, that's a great case. Why is that a great case? I will say, what's my recourse? Take the ox, right? Take the hefker ox. It's hefker. The Gemara says, if that's the case, lezel v'leise, go ahead and take the ox. To which the Gemara says, no, b'shekadav v'zacha ba'achar. I was ready to do that, but someone beat me to it. So I'll say, so now watch this case. It's actually an interesting case. So a shar of hefker, right, an ownerless shar, gores my ox. I'm upset, but I figured, okay, no problem. I'm going to go and take possession of that ownerless ox. Then what happens? Reuven comes along and acquires the ox before I had a chance to do it. So we'll say, so now you might have thought that what? So now what's your plan? I'm going to go to Reuven. And say, Reuven, listen, your ox went ahead and gored my ox. So I'll say, in that case, there's no claim. There's no claim. Why? Because at the time of damage, the ox was not owned by Reuven, and therefore, even though Reuven now subsequently acquired it, halach l'maisa, there's no liability. Really interesting, right? So again, an ownerless ox does damage to me. I have the ability now. The easiest case is I go and acquire that ox, and that's the source of my repayment. Someone else chapterine before me, and now again, but I have no claim against that individual. Incredible. So the Gemara goes back to Ravina says, comes to a different. Listen to this. Nagach v'achar kach hikdish. Nagach v'achar kach hifkir. So Rabbi said this is an interesting case. It also, Ravina says it comes to exclude a different case. Watch this. What's the case? Rabbi says, imagine the following situation. my ox gores someone else's ox. And then I will say, what happens? Right after the goring, what do I decide to do? I makdish it. Like I said, I say to my ox, clearly, right, you really need a lifestyle change. If you're going around and, right, you're goring everyone, so there's a lifestyle change. I makdish it. Or I mafkir it. I make it hefker. But Rabbi said, and it's actually very interesting. Rabbi say, so it sounds like what it's saying is like this. Is halacha l'maisa, look at Rashi, l'me'ute nagaf achach hekdish, da'chi masha shim yuchadim la'adam echad li'olam mishas negichad shas hamadodin. So it's fascinating. So imagine, again, my ox now does the damage. Right after the damage, ultimately again, a makdish the ox. Now, by the way, this works both ways. This works whether we're talking about the damager, or the damaging ox, or the damaged ox. It's the same concept. But ultimately, what Ravina is saying like this. Ravina is saying that if you have the ox damages, and then right afterwards, the owner makes it hektish, or the owner makes it hefker, Rabbi will say in that case, there's not going to be liability. It's actually interesting. There won't be liability in that case, because what we're going to see, Rabbi will say, is, in order collectible damages, the status of the damaging ox has to remain the same from the moment of damage all the way through the adjudication of the process. Or really, it's until the verdict. So the Gemara, listen to this. The Gemara says, that's the part. It says, yes, okay, Rabbi Yehuda, afilu nagach, if the ox gored and then the owner was makdish it, nagach v'achakach hifkir, or ultimately again, the shar gored and then the owner made it hefker, pater. This is incredible, I'll say. This is absolutely incredible. The owner is pater. Why? Shneimar v'huad bevalad vehemis ish. Ad shetei misa v'amada bedin. Until ultimately, again, the death and the judicial proceedings all take place while the shar has the same status. Shavin ke'echad. Or gemar din lo b'inam, don't we need the verdict also to be in the same status? Hashar yisakal v'gemar din hu dichsid alaima ad shetei misa v'amada bedin. The Gemar din shavin kechad. I will say this is absolutely incredible. In order for there to be liability, the damaging ox has to have the same status from the moment of damage, ultimately again through the verdict. If anything changes in the ox's status throughout that time, technically speaking, there's no liability. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if the owner, after the act of damage, if the owner were to make the ox hefker, or to make the ox hekdish, right, then there's a change in status. That change in status ultimately, again, would mean that there's no longer any liability for the owner of the ox. And I will say, now, therefore, just to tie this back, the Gemara says that's the meaning of nechasim miyuchadim. The Gemara says nechasim miyuchadim means that there's only liability when the ox has a miyuchad status, a singular status throughout the entire process. And I will say what's interesting about this is this seems to be an easily manipulatable, right, loophole. Now, so again, we'll talk about that. Now, obviously, for a first-time offender, this wouldn't be worth it, right? Because for a first-time offender, you're only chayav what? Chatzi nezek. If you're makdish your animal, that's a full loss. So to speak, it's a full loss, right? But again, in a mu'ad situation, we could see how someone could exploit this. We'll see that. We'll say, shkayach will stop over here. Incredible. Shkayach will say.